Who's been to see the show? Oh, good. Excellent. Well, it's still on until the February the 24th, so please come because it's been hugely expensive and I might bankrupt the Sainsbury's Centre unless we get packed turnouts right to the end. So the show is for the 50th anniversary of the University of East Anglia. It's the birthday party for the university. And so it tells the story of Norfolk and Suffolk in things.
Sorry, I have to speak quite near that.
It tells the story of Norfolk and, Norfolk and Suffolk in things from the history throughout time, right up to date. So the oldest thing we have is this, which I don't claim as a masterwork of art, but I do claim it as a masterwork of design. And it's a hand axe, and it was found on the beach at Haysborough in 2000 by a rather clever person, because when he found it, he didn't touch it. He left it where it was, and called in the archaeologists and the geologists, and they tested the ground level where it was, and it was so low in the rock, in the sand, that it was discovered to be 700,000 years old. And that makes it evidence of the oldest known human settlement in northwest Europe. So it's a fantastically important piece of archaeology. And I think it's rather beautiful. And it fits in the hand really, really, really wonderfully. And the Sainsbury's Centre, those of you who've been there will know that it's all about odd juxtapositions. You put things together from different periods and different places which seem to have no connection and conversation, but they do all link up because it's really great stuff, and great stuff talks to itself. But in this case, we've got this hand axe from the Castle Museum next to this, my favourite thing in the Sainsbury's Centre collection. And this is an ironstone pebble from the same beach in Norfolk, which Henry Moore picked up in 1930 and carved into this reclining figure. So we've got that pebble from the beach at Haysborough next to that pebble from the beach at Haysborough. So that's the span of our exhibition, ancient and modern, two bits of stone. And then more juxtaposition. We've got this fantastic head from the British Museum, which is, they think it's Claudius or Nero. I think it's Claudius. And it was fished out of the river, the River Ald in Suffolk by an Edwardian lad a bit over 100 years ago, casting for a fish and hooking up this amazing bronze head. And how did it get in the river? It was thrown in the river by one of Boudicca's Iceni army returning to Norfolk after the sacking of Colchester. This was a statue outside the Temple of Claudius in Colchester on the site of what's now the castle, the Norman castle. And Boudicca completely razed Colchester, as you know, in AD 60, 61. And then the forces came back, well, before going on to London, they came back to Norfolk. And this was pitched into the river. It seemed to be sort of a mystery, random piece of disposal. But then a few years ago, this piece of metal was found in a field near Watton, and it looks a bit like some lead piping, doesn't it, at first glance? But then you look closer, you find sort of tendons in it, and it's a fragment of a horse's hock. And it has a very unusual metallic makeup, and it has an exact mix, exact match with the head. So that is the head of an equestrian statue that was dragged away from Colchester by the Iceni tribe, warriors, coming back to Norfolk. And for the Iceni, for the Celts, watery places were sacred. So rivers, bogs, lakes, marshes, were the places where the gods lived. And so they hacked, as I see it, they hacked up this equestrian statue into pieces and deposited each piece at watery spots on the way back to North Norfolk. So somewhere still out there is the rest of this figure, including a horse's head, which I sort of hope might turn up during the show, but we've only got another 3 weeks. When you do a show like this, well, any show, you have two shows. You have the show, the wish list you would get in the ideal world. Well, first of all, you have to argue with the team to get what you want anyway. And then you have this sort of fantasy exhibition of fantastic things. And then you've got to persuade the lenders to let you have them. And I must say, private lenders were nicer to us than public ones. And it was really difficult with these national galleries to get their best stuff, because that's what we wanted, the best things. And so they said no initially for almost everything, really major, and then we had to sort of find ways of persuading them, which we did. And this is a fabulous thing from King's Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council. And it's one of the great surviving treasures of medieval secular art. It's called the King John Cup, but it has nothing to do with King John. It's from the early 14th century, about 1320, and it's been in the civic collection in King's Lynn since Tudor times, but it was almost certainly made for a merchant family in King's Lynn, possibly in Norwich, or possibly on the continent. And it's silver gilt, and it's got fabulous enamel panels going around the side and around the base of a hunting scene of people men and women in 1320s dress and hounds and hair, and it's just fabulous. And until recently, if you got married in King's Lynn, you could go along to the town hall with some wine and ask to use this cup, and you could then take it out of the cabinet and put some wine in it and toast your future happiness. But then someone got it valued, and I think it was something like 8 million, so it got locked away. This is a fabulous thing from Norwich Cathedral, which some of you may have seen there, and it has a troubled history because it was commissioned by Bishop Dispenser, the Bishop of Norwich, who put down the peasants' revolt in 1381, and it was almost certainly commissioned to celebrate the putting down of the peasants' revolt. So it's a bit troubling now to us, the origins of this gorgeous thing, but it's also wonderful because, as you know, this was a great centre of Puritan iconoclasm, and our churches were completely smashed up in the 1540s, but especially in the 1640s. And this would have been a prime target for the Puritan vandals, who were especially strong in East Anglia. And someone saw them coming to the cathedral and picked it off the wall, turned it over, and used the back as the top of a workbench. Saved it. And it wasn't for 200 years that someone, I don't know, they dropped a hammer or something, and then looked up underneath of this table and found this amazing glitter and turned it over again. And so it's an amazing survival as well as amazing creation. And very good of the cathedral to let us have it. This is from the Tate, and this was another no first time, but I was really determined to get this. This is a huge thing. It's almost life-size, and it's in the first gallery in the show, and it's a really haunting picture. It's called the Saltonstall family. It's the 1630s, and the Saltonstalls were a really important, wealthy family in the north of England and New England. But the woman in bed is the one we're interested in, because she was an heiress from Halesworth, and she. She's the centre of the picture, isn't she? It looks as though she's just given birth, and the nurse is holding the baby, and her husband, Sir Richard Saltonstall, has come in with their 2 elder children, their son Richard, that's the boy next to Sir Richard, and the daughter. Looks to be that picture, but in fact it's not. It's a picture of birth, marriage, love and death, all in this one picture. The first Lady Saltonstall is on her deathbed. The figure by her side is the second Lady Saltonstall with her first baby by Sir Richard Saltonstall in the baby's christening robes. So that's a complete family life picture from the 1630s. And it was supposed to have a sort of sombre optimism, because it's sort of life continuing. But we know what the painter didn't know, that 5 years later the Civil War erupted. And our Civil War was every bit as bad as Syria's Civil War. And it's now, I've seen estimates that of 9 million people living in England at the time, 10% died, 900,000. So it's just so it's a completely savage war, which was particularly bad here. This was another no from the National Gallery. Very important picture, which used to be at Houghton Hall, and we got it by blackmail, because the Marquis of Cholmondeley from Houghton Hall was on our board, remembered that when he'd given it to the National Gallery, he put a clause in the contract reserving the right to borrow it back for one exhibition. So he wrote to the director, who just said we couldn't have it, saying, well, I think we can have it, because this is, if you look at the contract. So we got it. And this is Gainsborough and his wife and eldest daughter. He painted this when he was 21, just 21. And it's a fantastic self-portrait. It's a fantastic portrait of the dog too. The daughter died soon afterwards, so it's just, she looks a slightly ghostly figure even here. So I think she possibly died. This is possibly a memorial picture to her. A beautiful thing. And that's next to the Salter stalls in the show. We've got a popular vote. What's your favourite thing in the show? What's East Anglia's best masterpiece? And this one is doing incredibly well. And this exhibition is on two levels. There are things that are really sort of iconic and really well known as East Anglian treasures, like the best portrait of Nelson. And this, which most people wouldn't recognise as an East Anglian picture, is actually of a northern city. It's not Norwich. But the painter, Atkinson Grimshaw, grew up in Norwich. And he went to the Norwich School, and he was famous for these amazing light effects, which, looking out of the window of the Norwich School onto the Cathedral Close, onto the cathedral, you imagine the gas light and the candle light of the 1840s. It would have been completely amazing. And I also wanted it because his work is often used on the cover of ghost books, particularly by the stories of M.R. James, the East Anglian ghostwriter, and also Wilkie Collins, novels of Wilkie Collins, some of which are set in East Anglia. And this is Hilary Mantel's favourite painting. So juxtaposition again. We were lucky because Hatton Hall had that amazing show of pictures back from the Hermitage over the spring, summer. And so they had, they could give us our pick of things from their permanent collection. And we took this painting by Singer Sargent of Sybil Chumley, who was Current Mox's grandmother, and she was an amazing woman. She raced motor cars at Monte Carlo. She was a friend of Charlie Chaplin. She was a great figure, and she persuaded Singer Sargent to come out of retirement to paint this portrait. And she wanted to look like a 17th century Velázquez duchess. And so it's slightly ironic if you look at it. I think she's slightly taking the mick. But so to look the part, she commissioned from Worth of Paris, a leading couturier of the day, this fantastic dress. So we've got the dress out of the attic at Houghton and got it restored, and it's in the show next to the painting. The show is dedicated to Lisa Sainsbury, who was one of the co-donors of the collection, which she and her husband, her late husband, Robert Sainsbury, collected over all their married life, and I think they probably spent about 80,000 quid on everything they donated to the Sainsbury Centre, and it's probably worth about 4 billion now. And they were great friends of Francis Bacon, and he painted this portrait of Lisa in one of 3 portraits. And Lisa's still with us at 101. The show's dedicated to her, so that opens the show. And then the newest thing in the show is this window made specially for the show, and by John McLean, the leading abstract artist. And after the show closes on February 24th, it's going to be installed in the north aisle of Norwich Cathedral with 2 more on a similar theme. So that's the focus, 700,000 years from that flint hand axe to a new window for Norwich Cathedral. A great mix of stuff. Right. I can take about 5 minutes of questions if anybody has got anything before I leap into a taxi. Yes, hello.
So how long did it take? When was the idea cemented?
Well, I've been writing about art for the Eastern Daily Press, Art in East Anglia, for 35 years, and I always wanted to do this exhibition. But finally, 2 years ago, the Sainsbury Centre asked me to do it, and I then had to work with a team of academics and Sainsbury Centre curators, and we had quite a different opinion over how this show should be. I mean, I presented all these things that you've just seen, and lots of other things, and there was sort of silence, and I thought, well, they love it, but they didn't apparently love it, some of them. And one of the persons said, well, this is just a show of great stuff, isn't it? What's the concept? And I said, well, the concept is great stuff linked to East Anglia. And that's the idea. It's hugely eclectic. It's hugely, every media you can think of, huge focus on the makers, known and unknown, and just really celebrating this region. And we all love each other now.
Can you tell us
Well, that Atkinson Grimshaw is one of the things. Also, there's some Fabergé. There's a Fabergé model of a dormouse from Sandringham, and that would probably win, close to winning the most loved object in the show, and also the most hated object in the show as well, because people react like Marmite. They love Fabergé. They don't. It's such sort of opulent stuff, isn't it? You love it or you hate it. It's beautifully made. Anyone more? Go and see the show, please. It's hugely expensive. We're nowhere near paying back what I've cost them, so all entrance fees at £8. Oh yes, your students are, I think, 6. All admission fees greatly received. Thanks a lot.